the consistently disappointing cuisine? Or is it the consistently disappointing public transport system? No, it's none of these things. It's the people, of course. The consistently disappointed people. So, whether you're making a little hop across the big pond, popping over from one of our noisy neighbours, or just a bit lost, there are a few things you should know about interacting with these sarcastic and sullen folk before you get here. That's why we've teamed up with the fellows at the Department for Social Standardization, the Royal Vexillological Society, and the British Fascist Party to bring you this helpful little film. How to talk to a British person. Britain is still structured within a strict class hierarchy. It can be simplified into 3 clear groups. Each class will respond differently based on the class of the person that they are conversing with. The 3 classes are upper class, middle class, and lower class or working class. Once a British person has been born into a particular class, it is difficult, if not impossible, for them to matriculate into another one. As such, habits and language from each class tend not to permeate into one another and are typically resigned within their respective tier. However, as a tourist or a foreigner, you are exempt from this structure and are instead treated with, at best, general distaste with feigned affection, or, at worst, disgust and racial prejudice. The level and severity of this disgust or prejudice depends again on the class of the British person you're attempting to talk to, so it's worth taking a look at how they refer to one another so you have a rough expectation of how they may treat you. The upper classes are landed gentry, aristocrats, or individuals of some great means. They are usually related to one another by blood and are therefore the most exclusive group, and as such they will refer to one another with the hatred that one would expect from members of the same family. Interestingly, they will not refer to the middle classes at all, essentially denying their existence, and will, as expected, refer to the lower classes as scum, plebs, the oi polloi, or any appropriately derogatory verbiage. The middle class, which contains variants therein such as bourgeois, nouveau riche, or working class done good, are a societal variation that grew following the Industrial Revolution and were not present in the good old days of feudalism. Interestingly, and perhaps due to this fact, they will very rarely refer to themselves in any egregious or generous manner, as they deny their own existence. However, to the upper classes, at least to their faces, they will be overly polite and cordial, with the false hope of one day joining these ranks. But behind their backs will scold them with terms such as toff, scum, bastards, or any other resentful words. They will, as expected, refer to the lower classes as scum, plebs, the oi polloi, or any appropriately derogatory verbiage. The lower class, or working class, are the mobilized proletariat and former feudal serfs who make up the bottom rung of society. They are characterized by bad fashion and bad manners. They will refer to the upper classes in public as sirs and milords, but behind their backs as scum. They will, in turn, refer to the middle class as scum, and, as expected, refer to their fellow lower classes as scum, plebs, the oi polloi, or any appropriately derogatory verbiage. Now that we've covered the basic structural interactions between the different classes within Great Britain, let's go over how to hold a successfully meaningless conversation with a British person you may meet during your travels. Oh look, Here's one now. What a painfully average-looking fellow. Perfect. For the purpose of this exercise, we've selected a working-class done good individual, and so he is essentially classless. He is without class, as you could probably tell by his mediocre appearance. Ugh. Honestly, what an utter clod. So, before we try speaking to him, it's important to always remember the 3 S's of a British conversation. These are succinct, swift, and superficial. If you remember these 3 points, all your conversations with a British person will be successful. These are the most important things to remember. But even more important to remember are your P's and Q's. This is the British way of categorizing pleases and thank yous. So don't forget to combine S, S, S with P and Q so that you don't UFTCWTBP, utterly fail the conversation with the British person. Just to review, if you don't want to UFTCWTBP, then P and Q. Always remember S, 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 P and Q, okay? Good. Ah, look. You see the way his eyes are darting about, avoiding direct eye contact with you. This means that the British person is interested in speaking with you, or he needs the toilet. Let's find out which it is, shall we? Try saying hello. How do you do? Oh, the British person has engaged in conversation with you. A difficult task to achieve. How do you respond? Oh dear, you've confused the British person. How do you do is part of the British greeting parlance. It is not a question, but rather a rhetorical statement of greeting. By answering with how you are doing, you have broken a cardinal conversation sin. We will cover interrogative structure after the greeting has been resolved. Did you forget your SSS or PQ? You may have UFTCWTBP, you silly SOB. Gosh, is that the time already? Oh, and there you go. You've irretrievably angered the British person. Can you see the rage in his eyes? Is that the time already? Is a conversational ejection idiom. There are many variations of it, such as look at the time, what time is it, where's the time gone, etc. And they all mean the same thing. The conversation is over. Do not respond by giving the time. The safest option is to simply agree and say farewell. We will cover how to successfully end a conversation later, but for now, let's pretend you didn't offend the British population and start again. Try saying hello. Hello, how do you do? Well done. You responded by saying hello again. Repetition is a cyclical and effective conversational trait for the British, and you followed up immediately by asking, how are you? Now, let's just remember that for this exercise, we're using the most popular conversation structure adopted by British people. But please be wary that a British person can at any one time have up to 3 unique interactions prepared for a confrontation with a talkative stranger, friend, relative, or pet. The most widely used conversation structure is as follows. The greeting. Hello or how do you do? Please note this is not a question. The first question. How are you? The weather counterpoint. For example, what do you make of the weather we're having? Followed by optional improvisation. And then pre-goodbye, for example, lovely to see you. Followed by the farewell or real goodbye. Goodbye. And just a quick and important note. It is in the nature of a British person to, wherever possible, not engage in conversation at all. This means that they are constantly looking for a way to disengage, even if they initiated the discussion. Cursed with imposter syndrome and a culturally etched embarrassment, they will quickly assume that you do not actually wish to speak with them, or that you are doing it as part of some kind of wager or dare. That's why it's so important to remember the 3 S's and your P's and Q's. This gives the British person comfort and confidence that they're in trustworthy, learned and safe hands. To this extent, following a successful commencement and salutation, and remembering one of the S's from the 3 S's that we went over, do you remember? You are only permitted to ask a maximum of 2 questions. How are you, not how do you do, is a stock question that automatically uses up one of your quota. You are required to ask this question, otherwise the conversation will fall apart and you will have to run away as quickly as possible. If you want to ask an additional question, you will have to transmute your weather query into a statement, thus providing you with a free question. We'll go over how all this works. So, let's give it a shot. You now have to ask your first question, or 2, which is always, how are you?
Fine, thanks. Yourself?
Well done. You've successfully asked your first and penultimate question. You'll notice that the British person almost looked away upon answering and kept the answer very short. That's because he's lying. He's not fine at all. In fact, he just got lumbered with a massive vet bill for his diabetic cat. His brother was involved in a bank robbery, and all the toes on his left foot recently fell off. But you don't need to know this. Nobody does. Try answering the question. No, look at his face. You really messed up this time, matey. You broke the S's and UFTC WTBP. Never respond to this question with how you are actually feeling. The reason the British person didn't divulge any information about their troubles is because they don't want to trouble you. And in turn, you should not trouble them. The British person, well, neither wants to feel better nor worse than anyone they interact with, and as such, any interactions dealing with emotions, life, or anything other than the weather should be succinct, swift, and superficial. There is also the distinct possibility that the British person simply doesn't care and assumes that you don't care either. Oh, look. He's entered British option paralysis. You've really foxed him. He's stuck between fight or flight. Oh dear. He had an aneurysm. You killed him. You put far too much pressure on the poor little fellow. Here, let's resurrect him and try again.
Fine, thanks. Yourself?
Just say you're fine. Well done. Now, you must immediately follow up with the weather counterpoint. The weather is the only universal thing that British people have in common and is the safest topic of conversation. That's because the weather is predictable and virtually always glum. The British population suffer from a collective form of pathetic fallacy. That means that the sky always cries, for they cannot themselves. In the rare instance that it snows, or if you are talking during 2 hours of summer that the British Isles gets per year, this in turn can turn the weather counterpoint into an exclamation. Otherwise, the weather counterpoint is either a statement or a question. If you phrase the weather counterpoint as a question, then this will use up your quota and you will not be able to ask anything else, moving on to either improvisation or pre-goodbye. If you phrase the weather counterpoint as a statement, you will allow yourself a single question before the denouement. Try it now.
Yes, it is rather, isn't it?
wonderful, perfectly executed. You'll notice that the British person phrased their response as a rhetorical question, meaning that they have kept one of their questions too. What an exciting battle of wits. After the weather counterpoint, you are presented with the chance for optional improvisation. As a rule of thumb, try not to do this, as it can cause the British person to become confused or intimidated. A conversation that lasts more than a couple of minutes can often be misconstrued as affection or even a marriage proposal. Wherever possible, try to avoid improvising or adding unnecessary weight to a conversation. So, while improvisation is always an option during a conversation with a British person, never improvise during a conversation with a British person. It is optional, but not an option. And so, because we have greeted the British person, potentially asked 2 questions, and not completed the optional but disallowed improvisation, we can move on to the most complex phase of the conversation, the pre-goodbye and farewell. British people will always say goodbye multiple times, and it is in their nature to not end a conversation themselves for fear of being rude. This means that bringing a quick chat to a close can be challenging. There are cases where conversations have never ended, and the 2 people have just stood there in awkward silence, not knowing what to do, until one of the party eventually passes away of natural causes. To indicate that a conversation should be finished, we begin with the pre-goodbye. As mentioned at the beginning, this can be a phrase such as, "Is that the time?" The word "well" can be used on its own or in conjunction with a statement to turn it into a pre-goodbye. For example, "Well, it was nice to meet you." This makes the statement polite enough to indicate the conversation should come to a close. Other examples could be, "Well, it was lovely to see you." "Well, thanks ever so much." "Well, great talking." However, when a British person uses a superlative such as lovely, ever so much, or great, they actually either mean it in a modal way, and so it self-negates, or in instances where they are frustrated with you, it could mean the opposite. For example, "Well, great talking" could actually mean, "Well, this was terrible." Try not to worry about the undercurrents, but whatever you do, do not take it at face value. A British person will rarely have a good time doing anything, so don't be upset that they didn't enjoy the conversation. Similarly, a very common tactic used by British people to postpone or escape from a conversation is the invitation. They may say something such as, "We should do this again." "You'll have to come over sometime." "It would be great to have you over for dinner." Under no circumstances should you sincerely accept these invitations. They are simply indications that the conversation is over, and the British person would prefer it if you didn't speak again. It is the only way a British person can tell you without offense that they simply do not like you. Here, try using a pre-goodbye.
Of course. That sounds great.
You will notice that when you used an invitation pre-goodbye, the British person accepted instantly but succinctly. This means that they have acknowledged that you do not want to see them again, and they accept this. I can see they've spoken to someone before. Try using a "well" conjunction.
Yes, quite.
Very well done. Another wonderful way to end a conversation. Now, following the pre-goodbye is the goodbye. It is important to remember that under no circumstances following a pre-goodbye should you engage in any other form of conversation than the farewell itself. Breaking the goodbye flow will cause a British person to short-circuit or explode. Try saying goodbye.
Righto. Goodbye.
Perfect. You've allowed the British person to continue with their lives and have not put any undue pressure on them. Other goodbye phrases that work are, "All right then," "See you later," "Thank you," "Cheerio then," or "Goodbye." As with the pre-goodbye, words such as "well" or "then" soften the blow of the overall conversation and give the British person breathing space to escape. Once you have said your goodbyes, it is important to depart in opposite directions. Otherwise, you may have to start the conversation again. Don't worry, though. Most British people are well versed in this and will often walk in the opposite direction they were heading to escape that possibility. And there you have it. You've had a successful conversation with a British person and have spent more meaningful time with them than they probably have with those closest to them. How do you feel? Do you feel proud of yourself? Well, you should. Talking to British people is challenging and unrewarding, so get ready for plenty more disappointment. And when in doubt, always remember S, 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 and P and Q. And also remember, when in doubt, S, S, S. So sorry. Apologizing is a British pastime and is always appreciated. So, if you ever slip up, or even just for fun, throw in an apology and see what happens. S, 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 and P, Q, and S, S, S never fails. So, here we are. We did it. And perhaps we enjoyed the process. I don't know. Anyway, oh gosh. Is that the time? Yes, I best be off, but I had a wonderful time. We really should do this again. Perhaps I could cook dinner for you. Yes? Wonderful. Oh no, please. I'm sorry. Let's not set a date. Let's just arrange it if we bump into one another. Righto. Sounds great. Well then, see you later. Take care. Oh, and good luck.